Hi there and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelos in Ottawa on this Monday. Tonight, debate in the House of Commons.
The Prime Minister has taken 4 different positions on the war in the Middle East in 4 days.
MPs are set to square off soon to debate Canada's approach to the conflict in the Middle East and Prime Minister Mark Carney's response. The Conservatives' Deputy Leader Melissa Lanceman will be here in studio live in moments. Plus, we're standing by for U.S. President Donald Trump to hold a press conference on the war, which he just claimed to a reporter was very complete, pretty much. We're going to bring that to you live as soon as it happens. Then, one of the most volatile days for oil prices ever.
It's very volatile. I mean, what we're all ensuring is that there would be a sufficient stock, obviously, to meet the demand.
Oil prices surge above $100 a barrel, the highest since 2022, then partially climb back down. What does it mean for gas prices and inflation? And could that mean interest rate hikes are in our future? Former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz will be here on that coming up. Plus, a pathway to a majority?
In the by-elections, we will be running candidates on the platform of making Canada affordable at home and stronger at home.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has now called by-elections for 3 ridings next month. If the Liberals win all 3, they'd secure a majority government. Our front bench will be here to unpack the political stakes of those races. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie are all coming up just a little bit later on in the show. First, though.
Whenever there are issues of war and peace, emotions run high through all elected representatives. That is obvious.
The Canadian position has been unprincipled, it's been contradictory, and it's been incoherent.
The Prime Minister has taken 4 different positions on the war in the Middle East in 4 days. All they are doing is trying to pander in all directions while dividing our country.
In 90 minutes, MPs will square off in the House of Commons to debate Canada's approach to the war in Iran. It's been 10 days since the U.S. and Israel launched joint strikes on Iran, a conflict which has since spread across much of the Middle East. There's no end in sight, it appears, to the war, with Iran just naming a new ruler, the son of the country's slain supreme leader. All of this uncertainty has fueled massive volatility in oil prices, the likes of which we have not seen since 2022. We're standing by to hear the latest comments from U.S. President Donald Trump, who is expected to hold a press conference in about 30 minutes. Here in Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney initially backed the strikes on Iran in order to block that country from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Days later, he said he arrived at that position with regret, since the U.S. and Israel had not launched the strikes in consultation with allies. Further evidence, he said, of the failure of the international order. We requested interviews with both the Liberals and Conservatives ahead of the debate. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand's office declined our request. With me live in studio right now is the Conservatives' Deputy Leader, Melissa Lanceman. Hi, Ms. Lanceman. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start off. I understand the criticism that your party has levied toward the Prime Minister and his stance on Iran and what's happening there, but I wanted to better understand your party's position. The leader of your party, Pierre Poilievre, said today, we support the action to overturn the regime because this is a regime that has killed Canadians. Do you believe that that is the objective of what the United States is doing?
Well, I don't want to speak for the United States and their objectives. I think they can make that clear. Whether the president makes that clear at 5:30, we can't control the president. The objective of regime change in Iran is something that Conservatives support, and continue to support. We've had one position throughout all of this, and not 4 in 4 days, and that is because this regime killed 55 Canadians, 30 permanent residents. Their regime agents who currently live amongst us in Canada, 700 that we know of from our own security apparatus, and to my understanding, only 1 that has been removed. We asked the minister about that today. He certainly couldn't tell us that more have been removed, but we can control what we can control at home, and that's exactly what we'll be talking about tonight.
And I do understand that point. I think, though, on your point that, you can't control what Donald Trump says or does, I take that as well. But should that not also inform your position on what is actually happening? There is one position to be had on the regime, and you're absolutely right to talk about the Canadians they've killed, the Iranians that have been killed, that have been massacred, that have been punished.
Sponsorship of terror.
1,000%. But with the lack of clarity from the Trump administration, does that not have to also inform your position on what is actually happening, not just the regime?
Look, I think that we are, on the precipice of change in Iran. And I've stood with this community for many, many years before I was elected, many years as an elected politician. I stood there with Liberal MPs on the stage asking for exactly this, a change of regime in Iran by the people of Iran. They've obviously got some help now for a better future, a future after 47 years of being subjugated to mass murder, mass imprisonment. Those long arms of the regime, again, are in our own communities, where I'm an MP with a sizable Iranian population. I have people call my office. I have calls with them. They're in a car with a blurred out background far away from their house because they are terrified of the activists that we have living on our soil. They've made Canada a safe haven for their activities, and that's why we should be happy about this.
But are you sure there is something to be happy about? I understand all the points you just laid out. Your criticism, your party's criticism of the federal government, though, has been around the Prime Minister, for example, talking about how there wasn't consultation, or how the strikes without that consultation could have contravened, just wait a second, could have contravened the international law, or how he eventually said this isn't a blank check because of a lot of criticism and pushback to the idea that President Trump has not been clear about what the objectives are. You said just now that the Iranians are obviously getting help. What is obvious about what Donald Trump is doing? Because I feel like it's
killing the supreme
unclear.
leader for 1 point, but
who is now replaced by his son.
We've been critical of the Prime Minister's position because he hasn't had a single position. He started again with we support the airstrikes. Then it was we regret that support. Then it's in contravention of international law, and then it was what we might join it. And the Prime Minister hasn't made clear to Canadians, and he hasn't made clear certainly to the House of Commons, and he won't be there at the debate tonight to make his position clear. And from question period today, we had the Foreign Minister, who's not interviewing on your show, get up and give an additional 2 positions that are saying different things to different people. That confuses Canadians within the Iranian diaspora, it confuses Canadians right across the country, and it confuses our allies about the position that we hold as Canadians.
I agree the position is confusing. I wish I could ask the government about it. I have raised it multiple times on this show. My question to you, though, with great respect, Ms. Lanceman, is your party's position. You have a position on the regime. Do you have a position on the actions launched by the U.S. in Israel?
We supported those actions in order to have regime change.
But the regime change hasn't occurred.
The regime change hasn't occurred, and we supported those actions in light of a potential regime change. And we want to see a regime change. We want to see a regime replaced by an elected government chosen by the Iranian people for a future in Iran that is free of murder, of locking up dissidents, of locking up journalists, of throwing gay people off of roofs, of protecting women's rights, all of the things that Liberal MPs and MPs from multiple parties have gotten up in the House and advocated for every step of the way.
But Donald Trump hasn't. And that's why I ask about your party's position about his actions, right? Because he is not standing up there saying all the very correct things that you just did about the regime and about the validity of overturning the regime. He has changed his message at least 4 times to my count on what the objectives are, about where things are at, about how far he's prepared to go.
I don't know how
That's why I asked.
Yeah, I don't know how many more times to tell you that our position, again, is support of this, support regime change. We're going to stand with the Iranian people, both in the diaspora here and the millions around the world that have been in the streets demanding this. We've had that position from the beginning. We'll have that position tonight, and we'll have that position tomorrow.
But just because you keep saying it doesn't mean it acknowledges the reality of the fact that this isn't just about the regime. I'm agreeing with everything you're saying about the regime. I understand the clarity of your position on the regime, but should there not be some nuance, and is it not tolerable that there be some nuance to other parties' positions or the government's position, given it's Donald Trump leading the charge and he has offered no clarity on his own objectives?
Yeah, look, I don't think that the thing that you're looking for is nuance, or the thing that the government has put forward is nuance in their position. They've literally put forward every single position to speak to every single community out of every side of their mouth. And as a result, we have no position at all. It confuses Canadians and it confuses our allies. And tonight, I hope that they put up somebody, if it's not the Prime Minister, to give one clear position about where Canada stands. And if we've been asked for some help, or if we've been asked to be a part of this at all, I think Canadians have a right to know. Parliamentarians certainly have a right to know, and we'll debate that in the House tonight.
I did want to also ask you about something that the leader of your party talked about in this context, which is essentially an emergency supply plan given what's happening. And we're going to talk about this a lot tonight on oil prices, something Canadians care a lot about because they're having a dramatic impact on prices at the pump. Interestingly, exactly a week ago, I put the question to the federal energy minister around essentially what does this mean in the Canadian context? And he said almost word for word what Pierre Poilievre is saying, which is like, this makes the case for Canadian supply. What is different?
Well, then why not actually unlock the ability to get Canadian supply to European markets or to Asian markets by approving pipelines or by approving LNG infrastructure? We saw Germany do it in 200 days. So we know that it is absolutely possible to get something up and running in less than 200 days. And it's been more than 200 days, or just about 200 days since we gave the Prime Minister all of the power that he needs to approve pipelines to the West Coast particularly, and he hasn't done that. So in all fairness, the energy minister is saying all of the right things. It's just that none of the results are happening. There's an opportunity here for Canadians to supply the world with clean, frankly, moral energy to displace that dictator oil that people are relying on. We had that opportunity 4 years ago when the war in Ukraine started, and we certainly have that opportunity now.
I did press the minister on the lack of using C5, that it was approved kind of under emergency, the auspices of emergency, and hasn't been employed since. He said it would look for it to be used in the next few months. On the approvals, though, that you mentioned, you know, LNG, I believe 2 of the big projects, including LNG 2, are on those major projects list. They're awaiting, in the case of LNG 2, a final decision from the proponent there. On the pipeline that you and your party keep saying needs to be approved right now, like which pipeline? There's no pipeline before.
We want a pipeline. Look, we want to see a pipeline to the west. And the thing that's in the way, again, we've had this conversation many times on this show. There's legislation that is in the way. It's C-69. They've said it. Any proponents have said it themselves that that's in the way. The industrial carbon tax, the shipping ban on the West Coast. This is a monumental opportunity for Canada to show leadership in the world and to export our oil for good-paying jobs here at home. Again, I've said that we can control what we can control here in Canada, and that's exactly what we'll be talking about tonight.
All of what you just talked about is in that MOU that's supposed to be concluded by April the 1st. It's already been signed.
And yet we've had...
But may I just finish? And on Friday, an agreement was reached with the province of Alberta specifically and Premier Danielle Smith on the impact assessment process to change it to reflect like just one approval process versus varied ones. The Premier at the time was not saying exactly what you're saying. Is she wrong?
We've had a ton of MOUs. We've had the Prime Minister in his spot. We have a major project office that hasn't approved a single pipeline or, frankly, a single new project from start to finish. We can do all these. We are squandering the opportunity as Canadian providers to energy to Europe and Asia, and we want to see that change. We want to see that change, particularly in light of what's happening today.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note, Ms. Lanceman. Thanks for making the time. I appreciate it. Melissa Lanceman is the deputy leader of the Conservative Party. We're just a few minutes away from U.S. President Donald Trump taking to the podium in Miami. You can see on the corner of your screen there, he's delivering remarks to Republican colleagues, but he is planning to hold a press conference. It's supposed to get underway at 5:30 Eastern. It's the first time that we'll hear from him since the Supreme Leader's son took over. We will take you to that live as soon as it happens. I'll take a quick commercial break. On the other end of that break, we'll look ahead to that debate we were talking about with Ms. Lanceman with our front bench. They're all going to be here. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie in just 2 minutes.
When will the Liberals accept responsibility for what they can control and cancel their policies that make life more expensive for Canadians?
That's why we're fast-tracking projects like the Sunrise expansion. That's why the TMX optimization is moving forward. Mr. Speaker, we are helping solve the world's affordability problem.
We cannot control what happens in other countries, but we can absolutely control whether or not to drive prices higher with tax increases. Why not at least give Canadians a break from Liberal taxes?
Beyond the G7 finance minister call, we're coordinating our action. We're going to take action together to make sure that we can bring energy to the world, Mr. Speaker.
Opposition parties are demanding clarity from Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal government on its position when it comes to the conflict in the Middle East. MPs are just over an hour away from a debate in the House of Commons on the war, a debate convened by the government's House Leader. Prime Minister Mark Carney initially voiced support for the U.S.-Israel strikes on Iran, later insisting he took that position with regret and that the airstrikes likely violated international law. Last week, Carney also didn't categorically rule out, quote unquote, involvement in the war, but various ministers have since insisted there are no plans for Canada to participate. Let's bring in our front bench to look ahead to that debate. With me this evening, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt is with us. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. We're a few minutes away as well from Donald Trump giving a press conference. First time we've heard from him kind of during a longer period since the Supreme Leader's son took over yesterday. Tom, the criticism now that the government is getting from both Conservatives in the NDP and the Bloc, actually, it's kind of rare that they're getting criticism from everyone all at once, is about these different positions that the opposition parties say are incongruent coming from the government. Is the criticism warranted from where you sit?
It's sharper than it should be because, of course, it was an evolving situation, but everything's fair in war and opposition. They're just taking the different parts of what happened last week, the really full-throated support that Carney expressed as soon as the attacks on Iran started. He realized he had left himself no wiggle room, started backing away, talking about doing it with regret and so forth. So yeah, I mean, if you go through it and parse it literally, then there are changes of position. But I don't think that there are a lot of people in Canada who adopt the NDP's position that we heard today, which is, oh no, this is against the United Nations, and maybe we should have just let Iran develop the nuclear weapons. I added that last part, but it's pretty well implicit in what they were saying. Yeah. So it is tough. I mean, we were listening to Melissa Lanceman before, so it's going to be a bit of a kitchen sink debate tonight. Everything's going to be thrown in there. There's going to be some very ripe, low-hanging fruit about gas prices. Who knew? People care about that. So the minute, gas is heading for $2 a gallon. Sorry, $2 a liter. If a gallon wouldn't have been that bad. $2 a liter. So that's going to be really affecting pocketbook issues. And that's the purview of the Conservatives. They own that file. The Bloc will be in there to the extent that it can. The NDP will try. But I think that overall it's going to be a fight. It's a loud, vociferous battle over some of these issues that the Conservatives have been talking about, and they're going to go hard on Carney because it's one of the rare times that he has exposed himself a little bit. There has been a bit of a chink in his armor in terms of the consistency of the messaging.
Do you think the Prime Minister is vulnerable to that criticism, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's vulnerable. I agree with Tom. I'll even go maybe a little sharper than Tom on that. I mean, look, I think he went out with a statement that was pretty concise, pretty direct. We spoke about it last week in the sense that we were not to speak for my colleagues, but I think overall we were a bit surprised on how very clear the position was. Then after that, basically saying, I took that position with regret. Essentially, anybody please correct me if I'm wrong. I think the way in which he presented that was, this is an example of the breaking down of the world order. So it's with a lot of regret. So to Tom's point, I agree. It's kind of to soften a little bit the very concise and clear position he had taken early on. And then the idea of getting involved, can't speak to necessarily what the thinking is there, but at the same time, I can certainly acknowledge that you may want to say to yourself, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how this is going to evolve. We don't know where this is going to be. Iran certainly has the strategy of trying to bring as many people into this war as possible. So certainly that makes things pretty unstable. So that might be why he's saying it. So I'm not sure I would necessarily classify that as a change of position. And then saying that essentially, it certainly didn't follow the international process it's supposed to. I think that was the understatement of the week. I mean, I think we all recognize that. So the position that they originally taken was with that embedded in it already. So I'm not sure I'd say it's a change of position. Now that said, to Tom's point, I think, and to your question, Bash, I think they definitely can be criticized on their position and essentially the way that it's evolved in terms of adding and graphing sort of qualifications. And I think a debate makes a lot of sense for the MPs to have in Ottawa over the next little while.
Does it matter, Lisa, that the Prime Minister won't be at that debate? He did yesterday before the debate was called. There was an itinerary release. He does have an event tonight, and his office said there's no precedent for the Prime Minister to be there and that the Foreign Affairs Minister will basically lay out the government's position. And I think they said something to the effect of that's more than adequate. Is it from a political perspective?
Tonight, because I had heard that the Prime Minister...
There we are. Now we do. Sorry. Do you mind starting again? My apologies. We didn't hear you right after that.
No worries, no worries. I was going to ask you who was going to lead off the government debate tonight, because I had heard that the Prime Minister wasn't going to be there for it. Political or not, the reality is that this is the opportunity for the House of Parliament to actually weigh in on what's happening. There'll be a lot of things that'll be brought up in this debate, as Tom and Brian have both pointed out, not least of which is what's happening there, but specifically the impacts on Canadians. One of the impacts, of course, is what we're seeing in terms of gasoline prices. The other very real impact, Vashi, is what's happening in some of our cities and what's happening to some of our citizens disappearing, presumed to be murdered, as well as shots being fired in synagogues in Toronto. Those are real issues that have a real impact in our country. I think the Prime Minister should be there. He's made the choice not to be there. I don't know whether or not it sticks to him politically, but I got to say I'm a little bit disappointed, because I do think that the impact of the war on Canada deserves to have prime ministerial force within the House of Commons.
Do you think it matters, Benzie?
Yeah, Lisa's right, Vashi. I mean, when I was a young reporter, I remember being on the Hill for, I think it was in 91, must have been 1991, the first Gulf War, and Brian Mulroney was the prime minister, and there was a debate on Canada's involvement, and it was not that Canada, it was a different situation in the sense that Canada was more of a willing participant in 1991 than we would be in this case. But I think given the prime minister's I would say shifting positions or narrowly evolving positions. I think he should be there. I understand why he's not, though. Probably he's not because of the fact that his positions have been evolving. Now, in fairness to him, the positions of President Trump have also been evolving. And on any given day, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, and the President himself have different positions. So the Americans haven't been clear. I'm looking forward to seeing the president's press conference later on in this hour, Vashi, so that we can perhaps get some clarity, because I don't know if we can expect the Canadian Prime Minister to be clear on Canada's position when Canada itself doesn't know, or the world itself doesn't know what the United States' position is on all of this and where this ends, because this is not regime change. It's not. It just isn't.
Well, clearly, not with the Sun taking over. It's not regime change right now, that's for sure. And to Benzie's point, Tom, I mean, we're supposed to hear from the President of the United States. It's supposed to be in 5 minutes, but he's still talking at the podium right now in his address to Republicans. So I will never guarantee something like that. But he told CBS a few hours ago, like he's calling all these reporters, right? He told CBS a few hours ago, Tom, that the war is complete, pretty much. Last night, to Benzie's point, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, was on 60 Minutes saying this thing is in the very early stages. There is really no clarity from the U.S.
What a great pick to illustrate the point about Carney's own reactions, right? And on the plane, on Air Force One, yes, over the weekend, we had a very clear question to President Trump. Wasn't the United States involved in the bombing of that school? Trump, with his typical look, says, no, I think that was probably Iran. Hegseth was right behind him, and the journalist managed to get a question straight to Hegseth, whose eyes rolled, saying, what do? Do I contradict the boss, or do I try to use one of my lines? He chose to use one of his lines, which is, we're studying it, we're looking at it. No question whatsoever of trying to pin this on Iran. So this is pure Trump. I mean, this thing's almost over. Really, there might be a little bit of exaggeration in that, because there's a country of 90 million people with a deeply embedded military, and just the Revolutionary Guard Corps is very much still alive. They're still well equipped, and this thing is anything but over. And if anybody thought that, Trump, the weekend that it launched, he said, well, I've done this, and I'm going to decapitate. The rest is up to you, saying to the people who had been in the streets, well, go get shot at again by the Revolutionary Guard, because we're not going to do anything beyond that. Now it's up to you. That's the Pontius Pilate approach that Trump takes to these things. He's done his bit. The rest is up to you. He wanted to go after them. He said that it was about the nuclear program. He said it was over. Last year, he boasted that it was done. Then all of a sudden, it's not quite done. We've still got to go after that. So we never know with Trump. There's so much malarkey involved in his statements. And the average person in the public is hard-pressed to understand what the end game is, because I certainly don't know. And I can't tell from any of the contradictory statements coming out of the people who are primarily involved.
I have just 30 seconds left, Brian. Last word to you. Does that, as Tom sort of alluded to, kind of explain all the evolution of Carney's position, or should it have been taken into account prior to asserting the initial position by the Prime Minister?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that that also could play a role in the Prime Minister's position, maybe trying to keep it very concise at the beginning, as we saw, and then trying to qualify a little bit, as I already mentioned and others have commented on. So I think that's totally fair for the Prime Minister to have. And I also would add Iran's actions are pretty erratic as well. And as already mentioned, they're trying to goad other countries to get involved, and that certainly makes everything a little more uncertain as well.
Okay, I'll take a quick commercial break. The front bench is sticking around. We're still standing by for the president's press conference, but when we return, we'll pay attention to some domestic politics and the fact that 3 by-elections were called over the weekend. We're talking about that next.
In the by-elections, we will be running candidates on the platform of making Canada affordable at home and stronger at home. We think that the #1 issue in all 3 of these communities is that people can't afford to eat after the Prime Minister doubled food inflation.
With the question of having a minority or majority government, this is not what we hear from door to door, and it shouldn't be that way. What we need and what the people in Terrebonne need is a voice to support their concerns, their needs in Ottawa.
In just over a month, some Canadians in Ontario and Quebec will be headed to the polls to vote in 3 by-elections that could have significant electoral consequences. Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced April 13th as the date for the 3 races. 2 of them will be held in Toronto in ridings that are considered safe seats for the Liberals, while a third will be a toss-up in Terrebonne, where the Liberals won by a single vote in last year's federal election before the Supreme Court a number of weeks ago nullified that outcome. The Liberals currently have 169 seats in Parliament, just 3 seats shy of the 172 needed to earn a majority. To note, though, the Speaker of the House is a Liberal and would need to cast tie-breaking votes to ensure the government's legislation passes. Let's bring back our front bench. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie are here. Lisa, I'll start with you. It's interesting that there could have been 2 other by-elections, perhaps, that, wait a few weeks at Nathaniel Erskine-Smith in Toronto, but also Alexandre Boulerice in Quebec. Why do you think the Prime Minister thought now was a good time to go with these 3 politically?
Maybe just to clear the decks and get it going, or maybe he feels he needs to have more support in the House, because those are 3 empty seats sitting there right now, and it's time to move on those. But if I could just comment on, I'm going to leave Terrebonne for Mr. Mulcair, because I think he understands Quebec more than I do. But I will say that in the case of University of Rosedale, in the case of Scarborough Southwest, man, the Liberals have appointed candidates that are almost from central casting, that make so much sense for their ridings, that they blend in exactly with what the riding sees itself as. And it's been masterful just watching how they don't think about what a nomination process is. They don't really care. They're going to appoint who they think is the individual that's going to give them the best chance of winning in that particular riding. And that's what they've done. So it's going to be tough for the Conservatives, who want to run on, of course, what they said, which is some kind of policy or platform or how are you feeling. But they're running up against a real tough opponent in terms of high visibility, well-respected members of that community who are running on the coattails of Mr. Carney. So it's going to be tough for Conservatives, and I don't think we should take anything from these by-elections in terms of reading the tea leaves. But again, Terrebonne is one that I leave to other experts to talk about.
And I will jump to Tom in a moment, but I'll get Benzie to weigh in on those 2 Toronto seats, because the candidates are, and you'll know them better than the rest of us, Benzie, Danielle Martin, who kind of infamously had that viral video about defending public health care. She's a doctor, a physician. And then the former, now former, Ontario NDP deputy leader. So both like very, very progressive candidates, particularly relative to where Carney has, some would argue, taken the Liberals over the past number of months.
Yeah, certainly Dolly Begum in Scarborough Southwest is a masterstroke. She won that seat for the provincial New Democrats last February, Vashi, with 40-something% of the vote. So I would be very surprised if she doesn't get more than 50 or 60% of the vote in the by-election there as a Liberal. Now, it's caused a lot of consternation at Queen's Park among provincial New Democrats who feel betrayed. I can't imagine the federal New Democrats are too happy either. Here, full disclosure, I'm actually sitting in University of Rosedale right now. I don't vote, but I've had Danielle Martin's canvassers at my door already with material.
Wow.
And I haven't had a peep from any other of the other parties' candidates yet. And I think I would say that this is not a situation, Vashi, like you and I have talked about many, many times in June 2024, when Toronto St. Paul's, which is the adjacent riding to this, was home to an earthquake when Don Stewart, the Conservative, defeated Leslie Church. Leslie Church since elected in the general election, but that's because she didn't have Justin Trudeau as her leader. She had Mark Carney as her leader. So there's not a chance, I think, of that being replicated in this riding, at least on April 13th. It's just a different vibe in Toronto than there was in June 2024 in Toronto St. Paul's.
That was the beginning of the end. Looking back,
Yep.
right? That was the
Yep.
beginning of the end of the Trudeau government for sure. Tom, your thoughts on the Quebec riding, and is it much more competitive than the two we were just speaking about in Toronto?
Oh, definitely more competitive than the two, and probably more competitive than it was when Carney came in with his wave just a year ago. It's going to be a very tough hold for them. I think they can do it simply because Carney remains immensely popular himself. I don't think they were wise in failing to give some profile to their sitting MP. She was not given any file with which the public could know her. But at the same time, I have to admire the grit of the Bloc Québécois. Nobody knew in advance when Carney was going to call this thing. The call was made yesterday. Within 2 hours, they scrambled. They called a press conference. They had their leader come in. Blanchette was there. The candidate who had lost the last time was there, delivering strong lines to the media. Now, all that shows to me is that they've been spoiling for this fight. I'm not sure it's going to be enough, but it's certainly going to be a lot closer than any of the other two that we've just talked about. By the way, I've had the good fortune to meet and to actually take part in a debate on the same side as her in defending our Medicare system with Danielle Martin. And I have to say, she's an amazing catch for the Carney Libs, and keep an eye on her. I'm not sure she's not going to be our health minister in the very near future.
Oh boy, news to the current one. We'll see. A few months away at least. We'll see. No, I'm teasing. We don't know anything. It's a joke. Brian, if I recall our conversations on the prospect of an election on this panel over the past couple of months, you've made the point on a couple of occasions that a majority of 172 is nothing to relish in. And I think the wider conversation here is certainly about whether these three by-elections gets them to a majority and what that does to inform the possibility of an election. Would I assume that you, would it be fair, I guess I could say, for me to assume that you don't think this necessarily sways the Liberals against one?
Yeah, so first off, I'm from the East Coast, so I can offer no insight on the ground with my colleagues here. So thank you for that question. Yeah, look, I said this before. I still believe it. I mean, even if they got a majority at 172, that's great for maybe a few weeks, a few months. But there's tons of by-elections with over 300 MPs, right? So, I mean, anything can happen. There can be other floor crossers in other directions. I mean, other people can run for other levels of government. People can get sick. I mean, the list goes on. So I just don't know if you can really hang your hat on that. But look, in a minority situation, if you get a few months, maybe a few weeks of certainty, that's helpful. There's no question, and not something that you're not going to strive for. But I just don't know if I would really sort of get the champagne out if you're the Liberals, even if you got to 172. It's a very weak majority. I mean, because they currently have a very strong minority, right? So in terms of the Talbot one, obviously that's well, first off, let me say I agree with Lisa. Shouldn't look into by-elections too much. Other than the Toronto St. Paul's, that was certainly a canary in the coal mine for sure. But looking into them, I mean, it's lower voter turnout. there's different considerations at play for those ridings, different local candidates, the list goes on. So I wouldn't look too much into it. For Talbot, I mean, saying, is it going to be competitive? It was, by one vote. So I think that's probably the understatement of this week. It's obviously going to be incredibly competitive. And what I find really interesting is I'm going to want to watch if Carney and co are going to actually make the argument in Quebec, give us a majority. I'm actually not sure they will, right? Because normally you would make that argument. And Tom knows Quebec way better than us, but certainly I've come to know that Quebec is a very strategic voter. So to me, you could also see that backfire in the sense that they say, well, we don't want to give you a majority. And we kind of like that there's a party that has the word Québécois in it that might hold the power once in a while and you have to negotiate with. So that may actually backfire. So it'll be really interesting to see how they play that dynamic, even if, as I mentioned, it would only give them a very weak majority at 172.
Mm-hmm. Last word to you, Lisa. Do you think the existence of these three by-elections persuades or dissuades the Liberals either way toward a general election?
Oh, I think other circumstances dissuade towards a by-election or a future general election in 2026 for sure. But if Tom gets to think out past the by-elections, I will too, and say maybe the reason why we're having this by-elections in April is because he's really hankering for a cabinet shuffle. And Lord knows he needs one, especially when it comes to the Minister of Immigration. So perhaps that's part of the reasoning on why to get these things out of the way in April so he can start with a fresh cabinet in May.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the discussion. Our front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We are still, yes, standing by for President Trump's press conference on the war in the Middle East. It's having a massive impact on oil prices and gas prices. And could that, in turn, have an impact on interest rates in this country? That's what I'm going to ask former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz after a short break. Stay right there.
It's very volatile. I mean, what we're all ensuring is that there would be a sufficient stock, obviously, to meet the demand. What should reassure markets, should bring confidence, and should reestablish certainty is that G7 is united, committed to work together, monitoring, like you said, the market, monitoring the stock of oil and LNG, and ensuring that we are coordinated in our approach. That was really the outcome of this morning.
Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne there after meeting with his G7 counterparts this morning to discuss the impact of the Iran war on energy exports. They were considering the release of strategic reserves to help cut oil prices, but have not yet reached a consensus on that. It's unclear how much longer the United States operation in Iran will last, and all of that comes as Iran's military and political leaders have now pledged allegiance to Mojtaba Khamenei, who has been named to replace his slain father as supreme leader. That triggered a surge in oil prices not seen since 2022. Take a look at this. Both Brent crude, the international benchmark, and West Texas Intermediate, the U.S. marker, smashed through the $100 per barrel barrier today, spiking as high as $119 per barrel in the case of Brent at one point. Now, the last time oil traded above $100 was in the wake of Russia's attack on Ukraine all the way back in 2022. Later in the day, however, those prices partially climbed down, closing near $95 a barrel. Here's what that volatility has done to gas prices. In British Columbia, gas is selling on average for $1.73 per liter, the highest in the country. And in Ontario, the average price of gas today is just over $1.51 a liter. So what are these oil prices doing to the Canadian economy and your purchasing power? With me to talk about that is former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz. Hi, Mr. Poloz. Great to see you as always.
Pleasure.
I appreciate you making the time. How significant has the volatility in the price of oil been over the past 10 days, but in particular, maybe even over the last 24 hours?
Well, that's a very significant thing, of course. It's a price that everybody pays to some degree or another. And it comes at a time when the economy globally was already pretty fragile. So it's more likely to have outsized consequences compared to if everything had been just fine. You know, we're already just adjusting, beginning to see the profound effects from the change in trade policy from the Trump administration, just starting to see the real numbers show up in labor markets and in prices. So this is another layer on top. We, of course, don't know how long that will last, but let's assume it lasts a while. It'll be a pretty profound impact on the global economy at this time.
And what are some of those outsized impacts that you reference?
Yeah, well, it's another stagflationary layer for the world, just like the trade policies. So it's going to slow the economy further. Of course, think of a householder now having to pay much more for gasoline or for their natural gas. So you get a slowdown in the economy at the same time as prices go up. And so that's the way we think of it as in the global sense. And it could be pretty significant, as I said, because the economy starts in a fragile place. For some places, such as ourselves and the United States, chances are it will have a net positive effect on overall GDP just because we are net exporters of these products. Underneath, the consumers will get hit. Their spending power will be constrained even further. The cost of living will go up more. And that's, of course, what we might see the most, the kind of fallout. But at the other side of it, there's a lot more revenue coming into Canada from those exports. And that filters around. And so we know from past episodes, this is a net positive, but it's, of course, not net positive for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? It's sectoral.
Yeah, it's good that you put it that way, because I think we've just been covering, for example, the Alberta budget, which was drastically impacted by a much lower price of oil. So obviously the converse would be true, but people are feeling most immediately and will continue to the price of gas. When you look at this level of volatility and contextually, I think I was reading, this is some of the biggest swings in the last 10 days since 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. Yes. And potentially, if the shock continues, could be one of the biggest ever. How dramatic might the impact at the pumps be? And will it largely just depend on how long this lasts?
Well, at the pumps, that's a fairly mechanical transmission there. I'm more concerned about what's the underlying effect on the economy. Rough and ready, $20 on oil, like say $60 to $80 would maybe add as much as a percentage point onto Canada's GDP that year. As you just hinted, it's not spread around to everybody, but eventually it kind of does. And so this could even be more if this sorts of $100 prices stick. But the price effect could be on the order of half a point or a percentage point, depending on how the whole thing works its way through the system. So that doesn't sound like a tremendous amount, but think about having your purchasing power being cut. Say gasoline could be a much bigger share of a household's income or their spending basket. For others, it may be a smaller share because they use public transit or they use an electric car or something like this. So, but for the economy as a whole, it's a pretty significant effect. And so what we will look for is all the consumption indicators and so on be slowing even more. Housing market's already on its back. And this is true for the United States too. So this is not just us. In the United States, the consumer is basically in a recession. The household is in a recession except for the top 10% or so of households who are spending well and keeping the whole thing afloat.
Are there things that can be done, given that it's supply that's constrained, that's leading to the increased price in oil?
Yes.
Are there things that can be done to augment that?
To mitigate the effects?
Yeah.
So one of the things we're hearing about today is the possibility of freeing up some of the strategic reserves. Right. I mean, that's after all why we have them. It would be for a situation like this. And fortunately, the U.S. hadn't really restored its levels of reserves from the last episode, but still there's a lot. And so if you think the thing is contained to this month, let's say, there is something that can be done there, and other countries have reserves too. So you can kind of mitigate the local effect. Geopolitically, maybe the priority would be keeping the Strait of Hormuz operating, getting it operating and then keeping it that way. That would mitigate to a large extent these fallouts that we're talking about. But I don't think fundamentally there's really not much you can do if global capacity is either constrained or in part destroyed. And this is not just oil, but natural gas, which has an even more, if you like, an abrupt effect. So there's storage of that too, but not the way we've got these strategic reserves of oil. So in the end, I think it's more of a case of grin and bear it and hope that it will not last long. Because if it lasts long, then you've got a lot of other secondary effects that come into play.
Well, let me conclude on a question about that, and in particular, how difficult a job the Bank of Canada will have moving forward when it comes to interest rates. We're very early in, 10 days into this, but if this does look like something that is lasting, does that change what you might anticipate from the bank with the rate?
Well, it's generally when we talk about a stagflationary overlay, it's kind of an ambiguous situation. So output is shrinking at the same time as inflation's rising. So central banks tend to be sitting on the fence and hoping that the price effects won't last. The longer it lasts, the more likely they need to react to the inflationary side. So that's kind of the broad brush approach. Here, of course, it's a little bit more complex because it's actually a positive, probably, for our economy. And so in that sense, it truly does shift the needle towards the inflation risk direction if you're just doing a risk assessment. But it could be modest unless it lasts long. And so it's all about time and how the indicators start to turn on it.
Does it raise overall the prospect of a hike this year?
Well, if your thinking was nothing's going to happen this year, it may do that. I wouldn't say it suddenly makes it that a hike would occur. It's just a question of odds, just like the weatherman says. You know, the odds are it'll rain this afternoon. But so you're just saying, well, the odds of that happening are higher than they used to be, but I'm not sure how high they were. And it'll all depend on how the whole episode, how long it lasts, and how the dynamics look. It's a real-time kind of judgment that will have to be played.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Thank you, Mr. Polas. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, that's former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz. And on the question he raises, how long the war in the Middle East will last, I imagine it will be front and center for the press conference that has just got underway. U.S. President Donald Trump slated to take questions from reporters in Miami. Let's go listen in live.
Are pretty well shot, but we're at over 90% decline in the Iranian missile launchers, which is very hard to reproduce and very hard to get. And usually what we were able to do through great equipment, a lot of smart people, as soon as they sent a missile up from a launcher, we were able to knock out that launcher within a period of 5 minutes or less, accurately, right on the noggin. So now we have low-cost interceptors effectively combating Iranian drones, and our B-2 bombers recently dropped dozens of 2,000-pound bombs to destroy missile launchers all over Iran and buried deep under Iranian soil in many cases. The soil was no match. And we're also annihilating the manufacturing base that the regime uses to build drones and missiles at a rate that nobody thought was possible. We're knocking them out. We know where they all are. We're knocking them out very quickly. We're ahead of our initial timeline by a lot. I would say that we probably would not have thought after a month we'd be here. In addition to the fact that we've taken out the leadership twice and maybe 3 times. And we, as you know, we want to be involved. We don't want another president that maybe wouldn't be willing to do what I'm willing to do for the good of the world, for the good of our nation, to be stuck with the situation in 5 years or 10 years from now. So we think they should put a president in, or the head of the country in, that's going to be able to do something peacefully for a change. They've been doing this for 47 years, killing people for 47 years, whether it's the barracks or even the SS Cole where they were involved. Very strongly, they always denied it. But where they were very strongly involved, in all of the people that died through the roadside bombs, died and are right now walking around with no legs, no arms, a face that's been so badly damaged. The Iranian regime has been attacking Americans and spreading terror for 47 years, and despite these countless opportunities to renounce their nuclear ambitions, which they had just a short while ago, they told Mr. Witkoff, who is standing right over here, they said, they actually said, we want to keep building. Essentially, in a real nutshell, we want to continue to build nuclear weapons. If we didn't knock out Midnight Hammer, if we didn't knock out their Iranian potential, if we didn't do that with Midnight Hammer, they would have had a nuclear weapon. They would have used it long before now. And at a minimum, Israel would have been annihilated. I was very lucky that we had the courage to do that, that we had the talented pilots and the great equipment. The B-2 bombers are unbelievable. We ordered 25 more, by the way. The newer, better version. It's we have the greatest military in the world. We have the greatest equipment in the world by far. You see that no matter where we go. You still need the people, though, to operate it and to use it. And those are the people that we cherish. Even after we obliterated their key nuclear sites in Operation Midnight Hammer, they never negotiated in good faith. They still continued to say, we want to build nuclear. We want enrichment at levels that were unacceptable. And they even turned down an offer for unlimited free nuclear fuel forever for civilian purposes. We had people offering them free nuclear fuel. They weren't interested in that because they wanted to build a nuclear weapon. So instead, the regime was trying to reconstitute its weapons program at a different site. They couldn't go back to where they were, the 3 sites that we obliterated. But they were starting work at another site, a different site, different kind of a site. And that was protected by granite. They wanted it protected. Granite's pretty good, but they wanted it protected by a lot deeper. They wanted to go a lot deeper, and they started the process while rapidly building conventional ballistic missiles. They were going to do it all at the same time. It threatened our overseas bases and soon could have reached even our homeland. The regime's intention was to use this exponentially growing ballistic missile threat to make it virtually impossible to prevent them from obtaining a nuclear weapon. So as you probably saw, they had a tremendous number of missiles, most of which have now been used or destroyed, and very unsuccessfully used because we have been able, for the most part, to shoot them all down. What incredible technology. The Patriots have been unbelievable, and other things. And the laser technology that we have now is incredible. It's coming out pretty soon. Where literally lasers will do the work of, at a lot less cost, do the work of what the Patriots are doing or what other things are doing. The situation was very quickly approaching the point of no return, and the United States found it intolerable, in my opinion, based on what Steve and Jared and Pete and others were telling me, Marco, so involved, that I thought that they were going to attack us. I thought they would, if we didn't do this at the time we did it, I think they had in mind to attack us. And if you notice, they did something which was very foolish, very stupid, I would say. They attacked their neighbors. And their neighbors were largely neutral, or at least weren't going to be involved, and they got attacked. And it had the reverse effect. The neighbors came onto our side and started attacking them, and actually quite successfully. If you look at Saudi Arabia, you look at UAE, Qatar, and others, but they were strong and they were smart, but they got attacked. Nobody, when I first heard it, I said, no, somebody made a mistake. There was no mistake. UAE had over 1,000 missiles shot at it, knocked them almost all down. On the very first day I came down the escalator in 2015, I said, quote, I will stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. And all I'm doing is keeping my promise. Think of that. That was in 2015. I said it. It was a threat then and a much bigger threat now, but no longer a threat, not for a long time anyway. We want to keep it that way. As we continue Operation Epic Fury, we're also focused on keeping energy and oil flowing to the world, and I will not allow a terrorist regime to hold the world hostage and attempt to stop the globe's oil supply. And if Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level. I will take out those targets that were easy and that I mentioned just before. We'll take them out so quickly, they'll never be able to recover, ever. If they want to play that game, they better not play that game. In the long run, oil supplies will be dramatically more secure without the threat of Iranian ships, drones, missiles, nuclear menace, or anything. So the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain safe. We have a lot of Navy ships there. We have the best equipment in the world, inspecting for mines. Again, most of their ships are down at the bottom of the sea, but we will hit them so hard that it will not be possible for them or anybody else helping them to ever recover that section of the world if they do anything. In recent years, the regime and its terror proxies have launched attacks on hundreds of commercial vessels. We're putting an end to all of this threat once and for all, and the result will be lower oil prices, oil and gas prices for American families. We've done that. We've done it. We brought it very low. This was just an excursion into something that had to be done. We're getting very close to finishing that, too. In the meantime, during this brief disruption, the United States is offering political risk insurance to any tankers operating in the Gulf. So we're putting up risk insurance. We'll perhaps go alongside of them for protection. We don't think it'll be necessary if it is. And if they do anything, the price will be incalculable. It will be so great that they will have wished they never did it, because you have to keep the straits flowing. With all of that, it affects other countries much more than it does the United States. It doesn't really affect us. We have so much oil. We have tremendous oil and gas, much more than we need. We have Venezuela now as our new partner, great partner. They've worked out so wonderful. We're working with the administration, the president, and it's a massive source of oil, gas, everything. But we're in a very good position, but very unfair to other parts of the world, like China as an example. I mean, we're doing this for the other parts of the world, including countries like China. They get a lot of their oil through the straits. So we're doing this. We have a very good relationship with President Xi in China. I'm going there in a short period of time, and we're protecting the world from what these lunatics are trying to do, and very successfully, I might add. We're also waiving certain oil-related sanctions to reduce prices. So we have sanctions on some countries. We're going to take those sanctions off till this straightens out. Then who knows, maybe we won't have to put them on. There'll be so much peace. But when the time comes, the U.S. Navy and its partners will escort tankers through the strait if needed. I hope it's not going to be needed, but if it's needed, we'll escort them right through. And we have the greatest mine-sweeping ability. We have the greatest ships, and all of we know exactly where they're placed. We'll get them out of there very fast, but we hope we don't have any of that. And again, if they do that, if they play that game, we're going to hit them at a level that they have not seen before. So we're winning very decisively. We're way ahead of schedule. Our military is the greatest in the world, with the greatest equipment and the greatest people in the world. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Iran's a very powerful country. They were going to take over the Middle East. If we did not hit them, they were going to take over the Middle East. They had thousands and thousands. Since their last hit, they had thousands and thousands of missiles and everything else. Most are now destroyed. But they were going to take over the Middle East. Those weapons were aimed at Middle Eastern countries that had nothing to do with this. They were going to take over the Middle East, and they were going to try and destroy Israel. So we stopped it with good timing, and we're very proud to be involved in this, and it's going to be ended soon. And if it starts up again, they'll be hit even harder. Thank you very much for being here. Go ahead. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Do you approve of Iran's new supreme leader? And secondly, can you tell us more about your call with Russian President Vladimir Putin today?
Yes.
What did you discuss?
Yes, I had a very good call with President Putin. We had a lot of people on the line from our side, from his side. We were talking about Ukraine, which is just a never-ending fight. And look, there's tremendous hatred between President Putin and President Zelensky. They can't seem to get it together. But I think it was a positive call on that subject. And we obviously talked then about the Middle East. And he wants to be helpful. I said, you could be more helpful by getting the Ukraine-Russia war over with. That would be more helpful. But we had a very good talk. and he wants to be very constructive. Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Iran, you called it an excursion. You said it would be over soon. Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you talking
but soon.
about days?
I think soon.
Okay, and with respect
Very
to...
soon. Look, everything they have is gone, including their leadership. In fact, there are two levels of leadership, and even actually, as it turns out, more than that. But two levels of leadership are gone. Most people have never even heard about the leaders that they're talking about. So it's obviously been very, very powerful, very effective.
To Cuba, you said that Cuba wants to make a deal.
Yes.
What would the United States get in return for that, and why should Americans trust Marco Rubio to negotiate it?
Well, Marco Rubio is doing a great job. I think he's going to go down as the greatest Secretary of State in history. Look at what we've done as a presidency. Look at what we've done as an administration. They trust Marco, and so do the American people trust. He's been successful no matter where he's been. He also speaks the language, which is always nice and always helpful. But he's dealing, and it may be a friendly takeover. It may not be a friendly takeover. It wouldn't matter because they're really they're down to, as they say, fumes. They have no energy. They have no money. They're in deep trouble on a humanitarian basis. And we don't want to see that, but they were very, very bad to a lot of people, as you know, and a lot of people living on the Cuban-American vote, which I got at record levels. Very important. Those people are very important to me. I know what they went through. They went through hell. Some of them have gone on to be some of the most successful people in the country. Cuban-American business people, some of them are like the most successful in the country. And a lot of them are friends of mine because I've been fighting this battle with them for a long time. The Castro regime was brutal, but they lived off Venezuela. Now they don't live off Venezuela. Venezuela sends them no energy, no fuel, no oil, no money, no nothing. They lived without Venezuela. They couldn't have made it. And we cut them off from everything else. So, yeah, they're going to make either a deal or we'll do it just as easy anyway. Yeah. Please, go ahead.
Tomahawk missile likely destroyed that Iranian girls' school. So will the U.S. accept any responsibility?
Well, I
for
haven't
that strike?
seen it. And I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries. You know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more. But whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a tomahawk is very generic. It's sold to other countries. But that's being investigated right now. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Mr. President, you've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared
Well, I think
for
you could
this war
say
to
it
last
both.
for?
It's the beginning of building a new country. But they have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft equipment. It's all been blown up. They have no radar, they have no telecommunications, and they have no leadership. It's all gone. So, you could look at that statement. We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further. But the big risk on that war has been over for 3 days. We wiped them out in the first 2 days. When you think about it, it's incredible. We wiped out a big Navy, very powerful Navy. These were ships. These were serious ships. These were ships that you buy when you want to win battles. They're all on the bottom floor. The sailors are all running off the ships. They refuse to get on the ships. The Air Force is gone. Everything's gone. The missiles are down to a trickle. The drones are down to probably 25%, and they'll soon be down to nothing. We'll have where they manufactured the drones are under fire as we speak. They're being hit. So the rest is going to be determination as to my attitude, along with the people in the Trump administration, what we want to do. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Can I ask you, you mentioned you were going to waive certain additional oil waivers or sanctions. Can you talk a little bit more about that and address in particular?
Well, we're looking to keep the oil prices down. We went artificially up because of this excursion into a very positive thing. I mean, this was an excursion that a lot of people wouldn't have done. I knew oil prices would go up if I did this, and they've gone up probably less than I thought they'd go up. But I don't think anybody thought we were going to be this quickly successful. This was a military success, the likes of which people haven't seen. We have the best military. We have the best equipment. We have, I believe, the best generals. We have the best. And this went very quickly. We talked about that with President Putin. He was very impressed with what he saw because nobody's ever seen anything quite like it. You know, Iran was a very powerful military country with all of the missiles. Now, you had the double attack. You had the original attack with us and Israel, and that knocked them for a loop. Then you had the B-2 bombers, which took out their nuclear capability, and they would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And they would have used it long before this press conference. And we might have had a much different press conference if we had a press conference at all. But it's been amazing. The military success that we've had is truly unprecedented.
You've told your congressional colleagues that you will not sign any piece of legislation until the Save America Act is passed. Does that include the confirmation of Senator Mullen as your next DHS secretary? Does that mean a DHS funding bill? And Senator Thune said today it's not a matter of whether or not your Republican colleagues agree with the policy. It's about changing the process. In other words, getting rid of the filibuster to get there.
So in order to get it, you're going to need Democrat votes. And what we're saying is the Save America, not the SAVE Act, which nobody knew what it was, the Save America Act, the Save America Act. And that's voter ID. We want voter ID. When a voter, we want to be able to see a picture of the voter. We want to be able to see that the voter is legitimate. We want, very importantly, confirmation that this voter is a citizen of the United States of America. And we want no mail-in ballot scams. So we have exceptions for the military, for sick, for disabled, and for people that are away, business trips or whatever. Even vacations will be very liberal in that. We've added two things to it: no men in women's sports and no transgender mutilization of our children. We don't want it's mutilization of our children, and we don't want that. So we added those two things. That's the 5 points. We have 5 very good points. It polls at 86% with Democrats. Think of that. The overall vote is 86%. With Republicans, it's 98%. And the only one opposed to it is a Democrat leadership because they cheat. They want to cheat. So we added those 2 points. We're going for the gold, and we're going to have to fight like hell. Now, certain things will happen. Certain things will take place. I'm here to do a great job for the country. But we don't have a country, if we're going to have elections that are so corrupt and so dishonest like we've witnessed over the last period of time. You know, as an example, virtually nobody has nobody has a system of mail-in ballots like we have. No other country in the world. France went away from it. They all went, you know why? Because it's corrupt. And Jimmy Carter, when he had a commission, frankly, I think it's probably the best thing Jimmy Carter did. He said, you can't have mail-in voting because it's inherently dishonest. And it's turned out to be totally dishonest, so we're going to fight for it. Yeah.
Activated any sleeper cells inside the U.S. There's reports that they have pressed that trigger button to activate those cells, at least abroad.
Well, they've been trying for a long time. We've been very much on top of it. One of the things we have to do is get the Democrats to stop the Democrat shutdown, because, as you know, the apparatus that looks into that, Schumer and the Democrats have shut it down, which tells you they probably hate our country a lot. But the Democrats have to open that up. But we've got very, very good intelligence into that. We know a lot of different things that have happened that have been very bad. A lot of them came in during the Biden open border period, but we have them under, we've got them We're watching every single one of them. Yeah, we know a lot about them. The biggest problem we have is the Democrat shutdown. We know a lot about them, but the shutdown doesn't allow us to do what we have to do.
Do you have to take him out? Does he have a target on his back?
You mean the new Supreme Leader? You mean the son?
How can there be an Iran with
Well,
another
I
Ayatollah?
don't want to say that, but you know, I was disappointed because we think it's going to lead to just more of the same problem for the country. So I was disappointed to see their choice.
You've said you have someone in mind to be the new Iranian leadership, if not the Ayatollah's son. What are you looking for in that person? Are you looking at someone internal, given that you just said that their leadership has been decimated?
I like the
and
idea
wiped
of, internal and eternal, come to think of it. But I like the idea of internal because it works well. I mean, I think we've proven that so far in Venezuela. We have a woman, Delcy, who has been president of the country, very respected, she's doing a great job. And it's, no disruption. We had, as you remember, Iraq, where everybody got fired. The military got fired, the police got fired, the politicians got fired. There was nobody. And you know what they turned into? ISIS. And we don't want that. We don't want that. So I would like to see people that are inside go. Now, they talk about the son of the Shah. They talk about other people, but, hasn't been there in many, many years. We have a formula that's been very good so far, and I think it'll continue to be good. The relationship is extraordinary with Venezuela, smart country. We've taken out 100 million barrels of oil. It's right now in Houston being taken care of and made so beautiful. And you have to see this at work. They have... It's brought to the refineries. It's being refined in Houston, which is made exactly for that product. And so far, but it's 100 million barrels of oil, and now they have another 100 million barrels coming. And it's like a partnership. We're getting along so well with them. It's great for Venezuela, and it's great for the United States. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. President. You just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But Tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have Tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report. Yeah, please.
You said earlier that we've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. What do you consider enough? What's your baseline?
Where they're not going to be starting the following day to develop a nuclear weapon. Where they'll look at that man and some other people from the administration and say, all right, we're not going to do it. They were not willing to say that. And when Steve called up and he said that to me, I said, well, here we go. Let's do it the hard way. But the hard way, I think, is probably the easy way. When basically I can see that they will no longer have any capacity whatsoever for a very long period of time of developing weaponry that could be used against the United States, Israel, or any of our allies. We have great allies in the Middle East, great countries that are allies. And they were staying out of it until they got hit. Someday they'll have to do a story. Why did he do that? Why did they do that? But they were going to hit them. If I didn't hit them first, they were going to hit our allies first. I believe, upon information and belief, but I believe that he was going to, they were going to take over the Middle East. They were looking to take over the Middle East. Now, had Operation Midnight Hammer not taken place, that was definite, because they would have had a nuclear weapon within a matter of weeks. But that took place. That was a setback. But look at the number of missiles they were able to buy and make over the last 6 months. And those missiles were aimed at various countries. And when you look at over 1,000 missiles shot at like UAE, they were looking to take over the Middle East. We got there first. lucky. I'll tell you what, the Middle East and those countries, very rich countries, are very lucky that I was president instead of somebody else.
Vice President when it comes to U.S. action in Iran?
I don't think so, no. No, we get along very well on this. He was, I would say, philosophically a little bit different than me. I think he was maybe less enthusiastic about going, but he was quite enthusiastic. But I felt it was something we had to do. I didn't feel we had a choice. If we didn't do it, they would have done it to us. I felt, based on the negotiations that were being had by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Marco and Pete, and everybody was involved, I felt that they were looking to tap us along before they hit, and I thought they were going to hit. And if they hit us first, that would have been a very bad thing. In the back, please, in the back. About the Strait, you mean? Yeah, well, I want to keep it open. I want to keep it good. You know, it doesn't pertain to us so much as it does to China. We're really helping China here and other countries because they get a lot of their energy from the Straits. But, hey, look, we have a good relationship with China. It's my honor to do it. Yeah.
You have called him an unacceptable choice. So does he have a target on his back? And how can you say
I don't want to say whether or not he does because that would be inappropriate. But, hey, look, I had a target on my back because, as you people wrote pretty well, they caught the assassin that was after me. So we just got them first. But they caught the assassin. They have him now in custody that was after me. So, you know, but people don't like to mention that, but they did catch him. And I'd like to congratulate our military, Secret Service, FBI, all of the people that worked on that, but they did. Yeah, please. Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You promised the Iranian people you would help them, but it sounds like you're willing to end this fight after your military objectives have wrapped up. Isn't that a betrayal of the people?
Will I help them? I'd like to, if they can behave, but they've been very menacing. You know, they're great people. They have an amazing population. It's amazing, smart, brilliant, energetic. They have a great, I'd love to help them, but they have to be in a system that allows them to be helped. And right now they're in a system that only allows failure. And I don't want that. And I want a system that's not going to be attacking us. We want a system that can lead to many years of peace. And if we can't have that, we might as well get it over with right now. Yeah, please.
President, as of today, there have been 8 U.S. military fatalities associated with the war in Iran. How many American deaths are you willing to have in this war?
Well, as I said before, when you have conflicts like this, you always have death. And I was at Dover yesterday. I met the parents, and they were unbelievable people. They were unbelievable people, but they all had one thing in common. They said to me one thing, every single one, finish the job, sir. Please finish the job. And I'll leave you at that. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
All right, that's U.S. President Donald Trump fielding a number of questions from reporters. If you had been looking for clarity, though, on what the U.S. objectives in Iran are, you likely did not find it in that press conference. A number of contradictions offered by the president. He characterizes what the U.S. is doing in Iran as an excursion, and he utilized that word on numerous occasions. He also said it is either very complete or just the beginning, and then insisted that it is both. He said he could leave it here or go further, and then said, we'll go further, but that they were wiped out, and this is a direct quote, in 2 days. Essentially, most of the questions directed at the president were trying to ascertain if, in fact, what he had told a CBS reporter prior to the press conference, that the war was complete, it was complete pretty much is the exact quote, if in fact that were true, and what he was basing that assertion on. And at times during the press conference, the president seemed to intimate, yes, that it won't be much longer. He said very soon when pressed on exactly how much longer it could be, but could not quantify exactly how many days or weeks. And then he also vacillated between saying, again, that things were almost done or that they would go further. but it did not qualify what going further meant. He was asked on numerous occasions as well about the new Supreme Commander, the son of the one that those initial strikes from U.S. and Israel killed about a week and a half ago, taking over in that role. He was asked specifically whether or not that new Supreme Commander had a target on his back. He said it would be inappropriate for him to comment on that. And then from an economic perspective, again, was asked on multiple occasions what he is prepared to do to augment the spike in oil prices. He did not answer that question, but said oil prices are, or claimed oil prices are artificially up. It's not artificial. The supply is greatly constrained, of course, because of what is going on in the Middle East and in the Strait of Hormuz, to be precise. He said, I knew oil prices could go up going into this, and they've actually gone up less than I thought. Prices were incredibly volatile today. Prior to that call to a CBS reporter that he made, they spiked, in the case of Brent, for example, in the last 36 hours or so, to $119 a barrel. They're back down under $100 a barrel in the case of the U.S. benchmark as well. But certainly there was a pronounced impact on oil prices because of the supply constraints. There is and continues to be a pronounced impact on oil prices. And as a result, at the gas pump as well. He again did not detail any measures that he is considering when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. He's referenced the possibility of doing something there. He did talk about insurance but didn't specify anything. And he also didn't say whether there would be any kind of mitigating announcements for the price of gas for Americans, though he continued to hint that that could be the case. So in the end, not a ton of clarity on exactly how much longer this will be going on, though he did claim victory on a number of different fronts. And finally, the point I'd leave you with was certainly maybe the most precise answer he offered in response to a question about when will you know that you're victorious, that you've won, something to that effect. And basically, he said when the when Iran is not able to launch or start developing a nuclear weapon tomorrow. He again contended that that had been the case prior to the U.S. and Israel striking, that they had to do it or else Iran would have attacked them or their allies. And essentially that was the only definition of what victory or what an end to this war might look like. No clarity, though, after that press conference on a timeline. I'm going to turn things over for your headlines tonight to Renee Rogers. I'll leave Power Play there. Have a great rest of your evening.